I'm not an animal lover anymore. I loved animals when I was growing up. I don't anymore. When I was 2 years old, my mom and dad got me a black gerbil named Goober. Mom accidentally sucked him up with the vacuum and killed him just a few months later, though. But she told me he ran away. She owned up to it during her midlife crisis in 2006 after a few too many shots of tequila. I had a number of pets after that, and I always wanted more. I had cats, dogs, snakes, rabbits, and even a tarantula. The tarantula vanished after a few weeks and was never seen again. After a night at my grandmother's new house, things changed. I told Mom and Dad that I didn't want another pet. Never, ever again. They'd glanced at one another, looking puzzled but not pressing the issue, so I didn't. I considered telling them why, but even at a young age I knew it sounded crazy. An overactive imagination, they'd say. Maybe night terrors. Either way, I never had another pet. I never had childhood visits to the zoo or go to that portion of the park where you always see dogs galloping around alongside their owners. So be it. I'm 30 years old now, and things haven't improved much. I don't sleep well. I prefer to keep animals out of my home altogether, and I don't like being in the woods. It's not because I hate the shedding animals inevitably bringing into your once pristine home, or the clawing and scratching and general chaos they bring about. It's something else entirely. I tried to explain that to my third girlfriend, the bubbly blonde girl named Jessica, who absolutely adored monkeys, but she just didn't get it. That, along with a number of other small things that added up but were never addressed, tarnished my relationship and eventually caused it to crumble. Anyway, back to 1998. When Mom told me I was spending the night at my grandmother's new house, I was thrilled. I hadn't seen it yet, and Mom had been all smiles when Anna was on the phone with her. She apparently described a big back deck, a pool they just installed, and added a luxurious guest room, new couches, so on. My grandmother, who worked for the state and who'd saved and invested her pennies early on, was sitting on a comfortable pension, various investments, and was certainly not hurting for money. Weeks passed, and eventually we left for Nana's. I spent the early part of the day wandering around the new place, looking for hidden passages. There weren't any. Or any places that might make a particularly advantageous point for a game of hide and seek, which there were many. We had lunch, went to the park, saw a movie, came home, and helped Nana make a fantastic dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, glazed carrots, and a coconut custard pie for dessert. I have an atrocious memory these days, but I remember each detail from that day very clearly, both the good and the bad. You see, at Nana's old house, I'd see deer strutting across her backyard in the middle of the night all the time, migrating from one part of the woods into another. I'd inevitably wake up in the middle of the night, go to the bathroom for a glass of water, and peer out the bathroom window. I saw them most nights. Not all, but most. It always put a smile on my face, watching them move gracefully in the light of a sometimes full moon, moving in a straight but unsteady line. The first night I stayed at Nana's new place, I saw the deer, and I was feeling particularly courageous. Nana did in fact have the big back deck she described, so I didn't have to peer through the bathroom window to see into the yard. I tiptoed to the back door, undid the latch, and opened it up, leaving the screen portion of the door shut. I cupped my hands around my mouth and called out to them, very softly, and then a bit louder, so that I was sure they'd hear me. Now, deer are skittish creatures, so you can understand how I might be surprised when the noise didn't just cause them to sprint into the woods or take a quick glance at me and be on their way. You can understand how I might be extremely unsettled when each one froze in place. Then they all simultaneously turned their heads to me and stared. What made it worse was that it wasn't just them. The other animals, the birds hanging about in the trees, the squirrels skittering around the outdoor fireplace where Nana left some camping essentials, all stopped in their tracks. Even the neighbor's dog, whom I could see a ways away from both me and the deer, froze. They all stopped, then slowly turned their heads to me. I mean, all of them. All at the same goddamn time. Then the suffocating, impossible silence. Even the crickets, which were normally so loud in the summer evenings, must have been staring at me. I felt something cold and hard in the pit of my stomach. The deer, and only the deer, took a small step towards me. It was in perfect unison, and I mean perfect. Then they paused for several seconds, and then another step, a longer pause, and another step. I slammed the patio door shut and fixed the latch. Then I hurried upstairs, no longer giving a shit about being quiet. I peered behind the blinds from a wide window at the yard below. The deer were closer, but weren't moving now. But all of those fucking beady eyes were looking right at me. I leapt into the bed in Nana's guest room, having locked the door behind me. I wrapped the blankets taut around my shaking shoulders and stared at the only set of drawn blinds in the room. I was on the second floor, far from the animal-shaped things on the lawn. I was safe, I murmured to myself. I shivered, waited, and felt myself tremble when a large animal-shaped shadow approached the bedroom window on the second floor. On the second floor. Something approached my window, and it was so large and so looming that it reached the second fucking floor. The thing didn't move. It simply stood still. What was probably 5 or 10 minutes felt infinitely longer. After that time, it began to tap its head on the glass. Then a little harder, as though it was making a half-hearted attempt to break the window. It didn't. I started weeping after that, because in addition to the creature wrapping its head against the window, I heard a sound outside my bedroom, in the hallway. Not a sound like footsteps exactly, but a small, clunky sound. Something lighter and coarser. I thought, with dread, in tears. I just sounded just like hooves, slowly and softly hobbling closer. It grew nearer and nearer, and I saw a shadow cast underneath my door. Whatever or whoever it was stood there, unmoving, for a very long time. It didn't try to force the door open or even knock on the door with its head. It just fucking stood there. It didn't budge. I lived to see morning, obviously, despite feeling my heart thundering in my chest and weeping uncontrollably. Time passed and daylight returned. My eyelids must have grown heavy at some point, fatigue, overwhelming fear, and I'd fallen asleep. I didn't call for Nana or Papa even once during the night. They'd been at the opposite end of the house, and I was sure the things would have taken me before they could help Annie. But the creatures just outside my door and in front of my bedroom window were gone now. Just as I was processing that information, there was a knocking, albeit a very human one, and I shrieked. I heard Nana's concerned voice on the other side of the door, asking if I was okay and if we had blueberry pancakes for breakfast. When I didn't answer for a long time, Nana rattled the doorknob and asked why I had locked the door. Eventually, I skulked out to the kitchen. Nana and Papa were sitting there, drinking coffee and chatting. Nana's wide eyes fell on me, and she proceeded to put her hand on my forehead and asked if I felt feverish. I didn't. Breakfast passed, largely silent. I did my best not to look out of any of the windows that peered into the yard. When I was in the process of forcing down a plate of blueberry pancakes that I would normally be devouring, the phone rang and I made another cry. Nana put a hand on my shoulder and picked up the phone. She exchanged words with someone on the phone, frowned, and said she was sorry and that it was for me. It was Mom.
Greg, honey, are you okay?
I lied. I told her that I was.
Good, that's good. Listen, I don't mean to cut your visit with Nana and Papa short, but could you come home? Your daddy was in an accident. It's okay, not a serious one. He was just driving down one of the back roads in Castleton and something jumped out in front of him.
Dear? Mom sounded slightly surprised and hesitated.
Yes, honey. They just... I don't know. It's not important. Your daddy has some boo-boos, though, and he really wants to see his little rugrat. Would you mind coming home?
I didn't hesitate to say yes. Understandably, Nana and Papa seemed slightly crestfallen. I can only imagine how it must be to hear your grandchild say they'd rather be anywhere but having breakfast with you. Maybe someday I'll learn. A few hours after that, they both hugged me and Nana covered my forehead in kisses. Mom picked me up and we headed home. Dad was mostly okay. The front of the car, however, was not. And Mom had to drive the spare. Dad had broken his arm and sprained his collarbone, but other than that, he was all right. His expression brightened as soon as he saw me, and I ran into his arms as fast as I could, squeezing him tight and thanking him for being okay. He wasn't hurt, but he was certainly, and understandably, annoyed about the car. He was also a little confused, he told me, because of the deer. What do you mean, Dad? I asked him. I was feeling that cold, familiar dread again. I don't know, he said, struggling to find the words. I didn't just hit them as they were passing by. A lot of them just... I don't know, seemed like they appeared in the middle of the road, just as I glanced down to fidget with the radio, and they stood real still. And I must have spaced out or something. I lowered my head, staring at the ground, and agreed with them that sure was weird. We never talked about it again, and I never told him about what happened at Nana's new house. So, that was my experience with the woodland nightmares. I made every excuse not to see Nana ever again, and now that she's gone, I regret it. I hope she didn't die thinking that I hated her, and knew that something must be keeping me away. Maybe. Suffice to say, I no longer enjoy the company of animals. They tried to diagnose me with anxiety, bipolar disorder, having an irrational phobia of woodland creatures, and so on. They gave me medication to help me sleep in the beginning, but once they tried shrinking my brain and told me I'd imagined the whole thing, telling me it was an irrational fear, I told them to fuck off and haven't been back since. I know what I saw, and I'm not fucking crazy. Maybe the way I am now is crazy, but I didn't just imagine this. Recently, someone moved in next door. That house has been vacant for about 5 years, for one reason or another. Honestly, I've enjoyed the peace, quiet, solitude, as I just moved here four and a half years ago myself. As you can probably guess, I'm not too much fun at parties. What few parties a single 30-year-old guy gets invited to anyway. The new neighbor brought over quiche the other day, friendly enough, and asked me if I was okay. It was one of the bad days. She asked me if there was something she could do to help, and I told her it was fine. I'd just take another Xanax. She forced a weak smile and told me to enjoy the quiche. I didn't. As soon as the door was closed, I walked into the kitchen, opened a garbage can, and dumped the homemade dish in it. I'd return the plate empty in a few days. Told her it was really good. I hate eggs, and I like pity even less. While I was just putting the plate in the sink, I glanced out the kitchen window. That's when I saw it. My neighbor has a dog. A tiny, scruffy-looking terrier sort of thing that probably couldn't hurt a fly. And it was sitting right behind the fence, staring up at me through the window. Not cocking its head to the side, not panting or barking. It just sat silently, staring at me with dark, beady eyes that were painfully familiar looking. I scowled at it, told it to fuck off, but it didn't budge. When its owner came back to gather him into her arms, though, it became normally animated, yipping and licking its owner's face and acting very much like a normal dog should. My neighbor looked at me, seeing me through the kitchen window and wearing a deep frown. She and her dog disappeared inside the house. Recently, someone or something that has been leaving dead animals on my back doorstep. Dead crows, a squirrel, and most recently the carcass of a dead cat. I've thought of telling my neighbor about it, but it seems like a strange thing for a dog to do. She'll probably tell me I'm crazy. Oh, whatever. Some nights I sit at the kitchen table looking out the window. The lady must keep her dog in a cage at night because I never see it out there. I sit and drink, thinking about Nana's backyard and the deer. thinking about the animals that all froze in place and stared at me, thinking about how one of these days something real bad is going to happen. And I can just feel it. I also think of the loaded revolver I keep in the drawer to the left of the fridge, right by the back door, hoping nothing ever shows up there that will create the need to use it.